The lights over the lab benches flickered twice, then steadied in a dull yellow. A hum rolled through the vents, heavy and sharp, followed by the smell of heated plastic. The ceiling fan slowed. A moment later, the main monitor on the wall flashed gray lines and cut out. I was closest to the test bench and saw the circuit boards glow faintly before going dark. The sound was like breakers tripping one after another, quick and flat. I stayed still, waiting for the backup lights, but nothing returned. The overhead buzz stopped. The lab felt hollow. A screen on the far desk tried to restart, its power light blinking, then faded. No one said a word. Shoes scraped on the floor, a chair shifted, but no voices carried. The only sound left was the thin crackle of cooling wires under the bench. The air kept thickening. The vents pushed out a faint chemical note, something like burnt insulation mixed with dust. I pulled my sleeve over my nose. The others moved back from the equipment, hands raised like it might spark again. For a long minute, the silence was total. The kind that presses on your ears until you realize even the small background hums are gone. I reached for my phone. No service bars. The clock ticked over fine, but every app froze before it could load. The wireless icon showed blank. I typed out a quick note anyway, trying to post what had just happened. The text sat in the box, waiting. Nothing sent. The cursor blinked like it was mocking me. The emergency lights along the hallway failed too. The building felt unmoored, every hallway dim, no exit signs lit. I heard someone check the breaker room door, but it was locked. A hand flashlight clicked on down the corridor, but its beam shook and cut across walls covered in warning signs. Still no voices, just low footsteps. When I leaned close to the bench again, the boards looked warped, edges curled slightly from heat. No flame, just that darkened plastic smell. The cables under the desk had gone stiff, like they had melted together inside. I didn't touch them. I only wrote down the time on my notepad, 9:47. The moment the power, the feed, the line, whatever you want to call it, collapsed. Outside the window, the street carried on, but it looked different. The traffic lights stuttered between green and black. A bus slowed at the corner, then stalled, its engine coughing into a stop. Drivers leaned on horns that sounded weaker than normal, almost strangled. No alarms rang, but the quiet inside matched the slowed motion outside. I felt the need to keep marking these details. Each note felt necessary, like proof. I don't think this was just a fuse blowing. The systems died in sequence, too ordered to be random. The silence held too long, like someone wanted it that way. I pressed harder on the paper, worried even ink might fade. I am writing here because I don't know where else to set this down. The outage was not local. It pulled the floor from under us in a single sweep. If this scroll still holds, if these lines remain when I check back, then this is the first entry. The silence has started, and I will keep track until it ends. 10 minutes have passed since the shutdown. The air is still heavy. No lights, no signals, no chatter. Just waiting. And outside now, faint at first, but rising, the sound of sirens cutting through the quiet. The sirens came low and steady, a drawn-out tone that bent the air across the streets. They overlapped, first from one direction, then another, until it was impossible to tell where they started. 10 minutes had passed since the lab went silent. I stepped outside to check, notebook in hand. The sky looked normal, clear with scattered clouds, but the sound pressed down harder than the daylight. Streetlights along the block flickered in an uneven sequence. Some blinked twice and stayed dark. Others pulsed out of step, as if caught in a loop. It was not the usual grid failure. The signal patterns looked wrong, almost like someone had forced them into a new rhythm. Cars slowed at intersections, uncertain whether to move. Engines idled too long, the smell of fuel hanging low between the buildings. A helicopter moved overhead, steady rotor chop cutting through the siren. Its searchlight did not switch on. The noise carried long after it passed, more craft following behind in a staggered line. People came out of apartments, shading eyes against the glare of the setting sun. They held up their phones, recording as usual, but screens froze. No upload symbols, no message alerts, just blank retries. The sirens shifted into intervals, on for 30 seconds, then a long pause. Each time they stopped, the absence felt heavier. I checked my own phone again. The draft post I had typed earlier still sat in the box. Not sent, not deleted, just locked in place. I forced a few more lines into it, marking the sounds, the time, the behavior of the streetlights. The cursor froze again after every word. A group near the corner turned their radios on. Small handheld units, mostly used for local security patrols. Only static poured through. One of them shook the device, then turned the volume high, but the noise was flat, empty of voice. They gave up and folded the antennas down. Their faces looked more tired than surprised, as if they had already expected this. The sirens cut off in unison at one point, leaving a ringing in my ears. It was quiet enough to hear the creak of wires overhead, swaying with the weight of failing current. I wrote the time, 10:12. A cat bolted across the street, then nothing moved for a while. Even traffic seemed to stall out, drivers waiting without reason, doors half open but no one stepping out. I kept scanning the horizon for smoke or lights, but nothing marked the emergency source. It felt more like a system drill than a fire or crash. No official cars passed. No announcements on loudspeakers. Just that pattern of failing lights and the pause of people who did not know whether to wait or act. I stood at the curb and wrote down every detail I could. The air smelled faintly of hot asphalt, baked under late sun, mixed with the leftover chemical sting from the lab vents. Not strong, just enough to keep me on edge. My hands were shaking while I wrote, but I pressed the pen harder into the page. This scroll may be the only record left. When the sirens returned again, they sounded farther away, like the perimeter had shifted outward. The helicopters no longer circled the same blocks. The city had tilted into a strange stillness, half-powered and unconnected. I do not know if anyone beyond this street can read what I'm recording, but I will keep sending it into this frozen feed. By the time shadows stretched across the block, no one expected signals to return. People looked at their phones once, then pocketed them for good. I stayed on the step, tracking the noise overhead, waiting for whatever official notice came next. If the first collapse was silent, the next stage seemed ready to arrive by hand. By early afternoon, the sound of paper ripping reached the block before I saw who carried it. A pair of workers in plain jackets taped sheets to doorways, one by one, with thick gray strips of tape. No digital boards lit up, no scrolling text. Just dense print on white paper, rows tight together like legal documents. I pulled one free after they moved on and folded it into my notebook. Neighbors gathered close to each posting, squinting in the sun. Someone read sections aloud, voice stumbling over long phrases. The words circled around data containment, temporary control, and planned failure. No clear explanation. Just enough language to suggest it was not accidental. The workers gave no answers, just stapled the edges flat and walked to the next building. Engines idled at the curb as drivers leaned out, confused at the lack of signals. A delivery truck stalled half across the lane, horn pressing weakly before cutting out. The air filled with gasoline fumes, sharp and restless. The scent mixed with toner from the fresh bulletins, each page still carrying a faint chemical tang. I held one close to my nose, and the ink rubbed faintly onto my fingertips. People tried to photograph the notices. Phones captured the images fine, but nothing left the device. A neighbor's screen froze as he swiped. He looked at me, shook his head, and slid the phone away. A few of us copied the key phrases by hand onto scraps of paper, uncertain if even the official sheets would last more than a day in the open air. The sirens had gone quiet by then, leaving only a background thrum of traffic struggling against signals that no longer coordinated. Streetlights remained stuck in off-green blinks. Arguments broke out at intersections, drivers gesturing without words. One man finally tore a notice from a doorway and waved it like proof, though no one stopped to read it. Back inside, the lab remained shut. The smell of burnt circuits had settled into the walls, less sharp now but permanent. I laid the bulletin flat on my desk and traced the official seal in the corner. It looked faint, half-printed, like they had rushed to push these out. I wrote the time again, 14:07. Marked as the first-day paper replaced the feed. On the stairwell, another sheet fluttered loose where the tape had not held. I pinned it back, though the edges already curled from damp air. A woman climbed past carrying 3 copies under her arm, folded neat, as if stacking them would matter. Everyone carried paper now, nothing else. By late day, the crowd thinned. Most had memorized the few lines that repeated across each notice. People kept repeating them aloud, trying to interpret words that meant little without a system behind them. I kept my head down, recording only the raw phrases, not their guesses. The sun tilted down, shadows long across the street, the paper edges snapping faintly in the breeze. The stillness held, broken only by the sound of fuel engines trying to keep steady power in alleys. The absence of digital noise was sharper than ever. I sat by the window, ink drying slow on the page, waiting to see if this written word was the only channel left. I have saved the sheet, folded once into my notebook. It may be the only record worth keeping when this scroll is read again. Tonight I will sort through the notes and fix the order. The sequence is clear now: lab flash, city sirens, and paper notices. The dark is still ahead, and I will mark it as it comes. I am writing this in low light, the pages balanced against the last glow from the window. It feels right to pause and lay out the chain so far. First came the flash in the lab, the wires burning and screens going dark. Then the sirens that cut through the streets, layered with helicopters overhead. After that, the notices, thick with official words, taped to doors where no one could miss them. All of it within half a day, too close together to call chance. The block around me hums with small engines. Portable generators crowd the alleys, each coughing out a different rhythm. The noise never lines up, a messy chorus of strained motors. Fuel smell clings to the air, mixed with faint plastic smoke that never left after the lab burned. You hear voices raised now and then, arguments over who controls which outlet, who has gas left, who trusts the notices. Darkness inside buildings feels deliberate. Not just a power cut, but an erasure. No backups kick in, no emergency grid offers relief. It is as if someone wanted silence across every channel, both light and signal. Neighbors move more cautiously now, carrying flashlights that shake with weak batteries. Even their beams look temporary, never steady enough to rely on. The paper notices still hang at doorways, though some already curl and tear at the edges. People touch them each time they pass, as if expecting them to change. None do. The words, "controlled failure," echo more often in conversation. Some say it was necessary, others refuse to believe any system could be shut with such precision. The rest stay quiet, saving their voices. I keep the bulletin folded in my notebook. I copy the key lines out again, each time in darker ink. The habit keeps me steady. Proof matters, even if no one ever reads it beyond this scroll. Paper and ink may last longer than signals ever could. My wrist aches, but I write harder, pressing deep enough to score the page beneath. Street sounds have thinned. Fewer cars pass now, and when they do, their headlights stutter as if voltage comes in waves. The only steady light is the pale line of the sky above the rooftops. The city feels paused, waiting for something to restart, though no one believes it will. I check my phone every hour, but the screen never changes. I hear the lab doors sealed down the block. Metal plates bolted across the entry, crews moving fast, saying nothing. Whatever started inside has been locked away. Still, the smell of ozone leaks faintly into the air each time the wind shifts. I note it, because even small traces mean the event is not contained. I sit close to the wall now, listening. The hum of the generators masks almost everything, but when one cuts out, the silence sharpens fast. You can hear your own breathing against it, and you realize how complete the absence is. The quiet is not an accident. It feels like someone's design. I will keep the order clear in my notes: flash, sirens, notices. That is the first cycle. The next will build on this, I can feel it. The hum outside is my guide. Wherever it shifts next, that is where I will go. At dusk I walked toward the old phone exchange. The street was dim, streetlights still stuck in their broken blink. The air carried a sharp bite, cooler than the day, and under it the smell of burnt insulation still lingered. I heard engines before I saw them. Trucks without logos stood parked at angles, their hazard lights off, their cabins empty. Men in heavy gloves worked along the curb. They did not wear uniforms, only plain jackets and hard hats. They uncoiled thick black cable from spools and dragged it toward a trench already cut into the pavement. The sound was rough, rubber scraping against concrete, metal clanging each time the coils shifted. No one spoke. Orders were passed with hand signals. The trench ran deep and narrow, lined with dirt piled high along the edge. Each time a section of cable was dropped in, a faint crackle rose like a live wire brushing concrete. Sparks flared small and sharp, throwing the smell of ozone into the cooling air. Workers moved fast, stamping down edges, shoving earth back in with shovels. I stood across the street, writing notes in short strokes. The trucks had no plates I could see. The workers carried no badges. A man held a handheld torch, not for welding but for sealing heavy sleeves around the cable ends. The flame hissed as it pressed into plastic, smoke rising in thin streams. The scene felt hidden in plain view, too purposeful to be routine repair. People passed but did not linger. Some slowed, watched a moment, then hurried on. Phones lifted briefly, but screens froze as before, no uploads possible. A woman asked what was happening, but no reply came. The men kept working, eyes down, pace unbroken. The only sounds were their tools and the occasional cough from an idling engine. I noted the location carefully, writing down street names, time, and visible details. I pressed the pen hard to keep the letters deep in case pages smudged later. I marked the coordinates as best I could from memory, a habit from earlier field notes. If signals return, someone will want to check this site. The trench filled slowly, dirt thrown back in until the coils disappeared completely. Only a faint line of disturbed soil remained. The workers covered it with boards, tamped them flat, then loaded their tools back into the trucks. No markers, no tape, no sign that anything had been done. The street looked ordinary again within minutes. Engines revved, trucks moved out without lights. The sound of their tires faded quick, leaving only the faint smell of ozone in the empty air. I stayed until the street was quiet, then walked back the way I came, writing notes as I moved. Every detail felt necessary, because nothing official would confirm it later. Back on my block, the hum of generators was louder than ever. Fuel drums lined the alley, caps loosened, fumes sharp. People argued over usage, but no one mentioned the trench. It was as if it had not happened. I wrote my last line for the night: unmarked cruise, cables buried. This silence is not only holding, it is being built. The radio in my room sits beside me now. I turn the dial every few minutes, searching. Only static comes through, thin but rising. I will mark what I hear next. The radio hissed when I turned the dial. Not clean static, but a layered kind, thin voices caught inside it. I sat close, pen ready, waiting for words to form. Most of the time it was just a steady wash, like air moving across sand. Then a sudden cut, sharp enough to raise the hairs on my arm. For a second, a voice broke through. The phrase was clipped, strained by the interference. All I caught was, "protocol collapse," then the line vanished back into noise. I wrote it down fast, the time marked as 1942. Neighbors came in when they heard the burst. Chairs scraped, footsteps shuffled, and soon a half-circle formed around the small radio on the table. No one spoke, heads bent close as if listening could pull meaning from the static. I turned the dial slowly, scanning from one end to the other. Stations that used to play music were gone. News frequencies were empty. Only static held, thin, stretched, and heavy at the same time. Once or twice the hiss shifted into a higher pitch, like something pressing from underneath. People leaned forward each time, waiting for a voice to break it. None did. The generator outside the window coughed, fuel running low. The sound cut in and out, making the radio static seem louder. A woman near the door covered her ears for a moment, then lowered her hands. No one left. Everyone stayed watching the dial, like it was the last firelight. I kept trying to track fragments, but the voices inside the static overlapped too much. At times I thought I heard numbers. At others it was only a long tone, steady and dull. I adjusted the antenna, shifted the box closer to the window, but nothing cleared. Each adjustment only gave more of the same, a wall of sound with faint shapes behind it. Someone tapped a note into their phone, copying my time marks in case paper failed. The screen froze after each word, cursor locked in place. They gave up, slid the phone back into their pocket, and wrote by hand instead. Pen scratched against paper, slow and firm, each person recording the fragments as if one version might prove truer later. The smell of fuel thickened as more generators came online in the alley. The hum wavered, uneven, as if each was straining. That vibration carried through the walls, mixing with the radio's wash until the whole room seemed filled with layered noise. No silence anywhere. Just two competing sounds, neither giving way. I pressed the radio speaker close to my ear once more. Nothing new, just that endless hiss, but my chest felt it more than my ears. Like it had a rhythm. I noted it down, unsure if it mattered, but the act of writing steadied me. Even fragments were worth fixing on the page. When the group finally thinned, the radio still poured static. I left it on, volume low, filling the room with the same sound that had swallowed every signal. The net was not only gone, it had been replaced by this, a kind of new channel that carried nothing but noise. I wrote that clearly, pressing the pen hard, "Silence is being overridden. I will keep the radio running while I sleep. If another voice cuts through, I want the time exact." The sequence so far is clear: lab flash, sirens, paper notices, trench work, and now the broadcasts breaking into static. I will keep tracking. The next entry will hold whatever follows this new noise. I am pausing again to set the order down. First was the lab flash and wires burning. Then the sirens that cut the city into pieces. After that came the paper notices, posted on doors where feeds used to be. Then I watched the cables dragged into trenches, unmarked crews sealing them underground. And now the radio static, filling every space where speech used to live. That is the sequence. I write it here so it does not slip. The generator in the alley shakes the wall where I sit. Its sound is uneven now, coughing hard at the start of each hour. Fuel drums stand half empty, caps loose, fumes drifting into the stairwell. People argue under the noise, counting liters, dividing what is left, deciding who gets power and who sits in dark. The hum does not fade, only shifts from strong to weak like a breathing machine. I keep the radio close, still tuned across dead bands. Nothing clear since the fragment about collapse. Just layers of static, rising and falling. Sometimes I hear faint tones, not voices, but regular enough that I write them down. If they mean nothing, fine. If they are part of whatever took the net away, I want the record. The act of marking feels heavier each time. Neighbors walk in and out, asking if anything has changed. I show them my notes, pages thick with times and short lines. They nod but look elsewhere. No one trusts paper yet, though it is all we have. Phones sit on tables like relics, batteries drained, screens black. The habit of checking dies slow. The air smells sharp again tonight, less of fuel, more of something like heated metal. I cannot place it. It leaks through the cracks around the window, faint but steady. I wrote the note in the margin. Smells matter when signals fail. They are the only signs left that something is still moving in the city. I tried once more to send these notes as posts. The words typed fine, but the cursor froze in place. The draft stayed locked, like all the others. I keep doing it anyway. If even one line slips through, it marks the timeline somewhere beyond this room. If nothing sends, then this scroll is the archive, stuck in the same moment forever. The building is quieter each night. No screens, no alarms, no background hum of appliances. Just the groan of engines outside and the wash of radio static inside. The quiet is not empty. It presses at you, demands to be marked. That is why I keep writing, not to explain, just to show what remains. I am tired now, but I will not turn the radio off. It will stay on low, steady, even if the noise never changes. I will keep checking fuel levels, writing times, noting shifts. If the hum dies in the alley, the silence that follows will be sharper than anything so far. This record has reached its midpoint. The sequence is fixed: lab failure, sirens, notices, trenches, static. I do not know how long the paper will hold, but I will write until it runs out. The next stage waits outside, and I will follow it where it leads. Tomorrow I will move toward the campus. That was where the first trials began, and I need to see what remains. If the lab was sealed, the university will be locked even tighter. I will go early, write what I see, and return before dark. I left before sunrise, pedaled slow along empty streets toward the university. The sky was gray, air damp, the pavement slick with last night's rain. My tires cut through puddles, leaving lines behind. At each corner the traffic lights were still stuck in their broken blink, green then black, no red. A few cars rolled by, drivers tense, eyes fixed ahead. No horns, no music, just engines idling too loud. By the time I reached the outer gate the sun had pushed low light across the stone walls. Barricades lined the entrance, steel rails locked together, floodlamps bolted on poles glaring into the morning. Security guards paced in pairs, plain jackets but heavy gear under them. Their faces were blank, no questions asked, no instructions given. They only stood with arms folded, watching. The gates themselves had new seals posted on heavy paper. Not the flimsy bulletins from the day before. These had a crest pressed into the top, a mark of some interim authority I did not recognize. Words stamped in black ink declared the campus closed until further notice, citing containment and control. The language was colder, stripped of any attempt at comfort. I copied the lines into my notebook, slow and neat. Students had gathered along the fence. Some pressed their notebooks against the metal bars, scribbling quick notes while glancing up at the guards. Others shouted questions that went unanswered. A few held cameras, but like before, the screens froze after every click, no uploads, no signals. Paper was the only channel left. Pens scratched steady across pages as the crowd shifted from gate to gate, searching for another way in. I walked the perimeter for a while. Every side was blocked the same way, barricades, lights, and guards. Trucks idled nearby, engines running, the smell of diesel carrying sharp through the wet air. Each time a patrol passed, people stepped back, keeping their eyes down. No one resisted. No one dared. Everyone just wrote what they saw, then moved on. At one corner a group pinned their own sheets of paper to the fence, copied timelines, observations, times of arrival. A guard pulled them down after a minute and crumpled them into a pocket. The students wrote new ones and pinned them again. The cycle kept repeating, fast and quiet, as if even small notes mattered more than silence. I stayed longer than I should have. Wrote the time marks in order: arrival at 6:12, first notice of barricades at 6:20, first student group gathering at 6:30, removal of postage sheets at 6:42. My hands were stiff from the cold, but I forced the pen deep into the page, making sure the notes would not fade if damp bled through. When I left, the crowd had not thinned. More people were arriving with bicycles, their wheels rattling against the curb. Guards shifted positions, adjusting their lines, eyes steady on the growing cluster. The smell of wet leaves and diesel mixed heavier, a damp cover over the whole scene. I put my notebook away and turned back before their focus caught me. The ride home was slower, my legs heavy, my head full of the images of fences lined with paper signs, torn down and put back up again. Each note written by hand, each torn away, each rewritten. None of it reaching beyond the gate. Back on my block, the generators still hummed, though weaker now, fuel low. I wrote the last line of the morning: campus locked, records copied by hand, no signals anywhere. Tonight I will add it to the full sequence. Then I will join the others who have started making paper timelines across tables, because memory alone is not enough. Back home the street was quieter than the day before. The generators still worked, but their hum had dropped to a low uneven growl. I walked past the alley and saw 3 of them lined up, each coughing smoke, fuel cans beside them nearly empty. People spoke in low voices, hands counting liters with sharp gestures. No one argued loud. The air smelled of exhaust and damp brick. Inside, neighbors had cleared tables and spread notebooks flat across the surface. Pages filled with dates, times, and plain sentences. Some copied from memory, others from scraps of notes torn from their pockets. Pens scratched steady, no pauses for screens, no devices left even for show. Each line pressed harder than the last, ink digging deep as if to carve it permanent. I took out my own notes and began copying. The sequence grew across the table: lab flash, sirens, paper notices, trench work, radio static, the campus sealed. Each entry short, sharp, stripped of extra words. We laid our pages side by side until they formed a single timeline. The sound of writing filled the room like a machine running at slow speed. My wrist began to ache, but I kept pushing the pen. The ache helped keep me focused. Proof mattered more than comfort. Every mark on the page meant the silence had not erased everything. People traded notebooks, checking each other's records, correcting times where they slipped. The work felt heavy but steady. Outside, a generator stuttered, then caught again. The dip in the hum made everyone freeze for a second. Pens lifted, eyes held still, as if the sound had warned of a deeper break. When the engine steadied, writing resumed. The pause left its own mark though, a sense that even this last current was temporary. The smell of fuel grew stronger as the night stretched on. Windows fogged from the heat of too many bodies in one room. Still no signals. Phones sat stacked in a bowl near the door, all dead, all black. The ritual of writing had replaced them. No one asked for updates anymore, they just wrote what they had seen. I copied the bulletin lines again, slower this time, tracing each word. Others did the same, building duplicates of duplicates. If one page burned or blurred, another would remain. The act was tiring, but it held us steady. Even children wrote, careful block letters filling scraps of lined paper. The generator dipped again near midnight. The hum dropped, then rose, then dropped lower. The smell of oil thickened. Conversation stopped. For a moment the room was pure dark and near silent, only the faint scrape of one pen continuing across paper. Then the hum returned, weak but alive. People exhaled and kept working. I ended my entry with one last line, hand pressed firm: records remain even if the net never did. The ink spread heavy into the page, a black mark wider than the rest. The timeline held. Proof lived in paper now, not in circuits. When I stepped outside for air, the alley was half dark. Only 2 generators still ran, their exhaust drifting upward. The silence in the gap between them felt larger than before, heavier. I marked the time and closed the notebook. If the hum fails completely, the dark will be total. I will be ready to write that too. The smell of ash carried into the room before dawn. I stepped outside and saw smoke rising in a thin line from the alley. The last generator had sputtered through the night, coughing harder each hour, and now it was still. Its casing was blackened at the edges, oil pooled beneath it, smoke curling weak. The hum that had filled the block for days was gone. Silence pressed down without it. I walked the street once. The paper notices on doors had curled and yellowed, ink smudging where damp touched them. No new sheets appeared. The barricades at the campus were far behind me now, but the memory of their heavy lamps stayed sharp. Here, the only lights were the faint gray of morning. No signals returned. The phones on my desk remained black, stacked like stones. Neighbors drifted out, saw the dead generator, then turned back indoors. No one spoke. Pens had run dry for some, their timelines cut off mid-line. Others still wrote, carving deeper with pencils. Pages filled tables, but the act had slowed. Without the hum, the rhythm was different. The silence felt heavier, making each scratch of pen sound too loud. I marked the sequence one final time, circuits burned, sirens cut the air, notices posted, trenches dug, static replaced broadcasts, the campus locked, memories stored by hand. The trail was complete. I traced the lines twice, pressing until the tip of the pen tore through the page. The ash smell lingered, faint but steady, mixing with damp concrete. My fingers were stained black from touching the edge of the generator. I rubbed them clean on the notebook cover, leaving streaks that will remain longer than the ink. The last current had failed. There would be no restart. I thought of the lab where it began. The glow of boards before they died, the plastic melting into silence. The net was meant to rise from those wires, but they were buried before any signal carried. The attempt ended before it lived. I cannot say if that stopped harm or erased possibility. There are no channels left to debate it. Only these lines on paper remain. Silence holds its own history now. The sequence stands written, even if no one ever turns these pages again. I am closing the notebook. The air is still, the street is still, the world feels pinned. I began with the smell of burning circuits, and now I end with the smoke of the last engine. Nothing carries forward but the record. I have done what I could to mark it.